Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, episode 68. It's your host, Justin. We have Amith Pratap here in the studio. This fella has 35 years in the self-starting lifestyle. He started out franchising out Kool-Aid stands, and we're going to talk to him about the topics of his self-starting route, how he sustained a self-starting lifestyle, his favorite business, why he chose the self-starter lifestyle, and then we're going to get into his business venture today, which is insight-focused consulting. But before we get into those things, I need to do shout-outs for our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. One is Ono Poke, is a chef-driven fast casual restaurant serving Hawaii signature dishes. The menu features chef-curated poke bowls. Customers can select various bases for the bowls, including fruitcake rice, quinoa, and spring mixed salad, along with vegetable seasoning and protein options such as the torched miso salmon poke, the albacore tuna, and spicy Thai salmon poke, or you can build your own bowl. Ono is in Hawaiian means delicious, and that is absolutely fitting for them. They're in various locations in Alberta and British Columbia. I would suggest that you Google Ono Poke to find those locations. Our second sponsor is Modern Gravity, is the best place to relax with their spacious float tanks. If you have not floated, you got to try this. February is always a stressful month. For only $39.99 a month, you can enjoy a float a month and let it all go. Go to Modern Gravity's website at www.moderngravity.ca. And that's it. The bills are paid. So how is your afternoon, Amith?
My afternoon's really good.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in. I'll get to the thanks right away. I mean, I know you're a really busy guy, and to make the time to come in and talk about this wonderful lifestyle is very, very fortunate for myself and all the listeners out there.
Thank you.
So let's get into, how is it that you were franchising Kool-Aid stands at like 8 and 10 years old?
No, I was just, my family's just always been entrepreneurs. That's what my uncle told me one day. He goes, you know what, we are just a whole set of people that just constantly want to be doing something, freelancing, doing our own thing. That's how they kind of started when they first came to the country. They had to kind of do their own path, and they really enjoyed it. So they started working different jobs. They realized, you know what, we've been doing this solo for so long. We kind of know what we want to do, how we want to do it. So I kind of watched growing up doing all that stuff, because I remember being 5 years old, my dad was doing renovations. And I started doing the rentals with my dad. And I was 5 years old feeding wire through the basement. I remember he's framing and stuff, and I started watching those original HGTV shows. We're talking This Old House.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
With Bob, what was his name? Bob something or another.
I can't remember. Yeah.
It started with a V.
Vila?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my dad, one day he came upstairs. I was eating my lunch. He goes, you actually enjoy watching this show? I'm like, Dad, I love this show. And then I realized all the influence of just what was happening around me was starting to affect me. And then, and of course, at a young age, I thought, how can I start my own venture, make my own money? And I was thinking, wait a minute, Kool-Aid stands. So I would scout out bus stops and everything, and I kind of controlled them. Like, all right, this one comes here with a bucket, a table, 2 chairs. This is my corner. If you want this one, this is how much it costs you. Because you can't really own that stuff. But the fact is, if you were there first, you had claim on it.
Yeah.
And so that was my key, and I started doing all that stuff. And of course, later on, as we got older, I started expanding to just fixing bikes. And I was always very mechanically inclined. My dad was always fixing cars at home, doing things. My uncle has his own garage. And so from there, you know, I was kind of always, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of creating. That was the biggest aspect, because I'm very creative. When you work sometimes in a regular job setting, I've got nothing against it by any means, but you are just like, ideas are flowing. And so you want to have that flexibility to go with that flow. Yeah. However, in the meantime, I did other things because you have bills to pay at the end of the day.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about the beginning. So I guess the beginning was the Kool-Aid stand.
Yeah, it was,
you had those creative juices flowing on how to franchise and branch out. But when you started getting into where this was becoming more than your 9-to-5er, you know what I mean? Like I would say, so I was in the corporate world in Stantec engineering for some time, and I was also in corporate world in other places. But that's a 9-to-5er. When I went into self-starting lifestyle, my lifestyle is actually 5 a.m. to 10 at night now, right? So when did that shift happen for you, where you kind of had to work a part-time job still, or you had to make money somehow working for family or whatever it was, but then started branching out into your own idea? When was that happening for you?
I would say my family was in their own business when they're about 13. They owned like a nightclub and a restaurant. So that's when I worked with my dad and at the restaurant and stuff. And I enjoyed it. I learned a lot of things there. But then I realized, at that time I had my own part-time jobs of working there. But then after that, when that ended, I had to go do something else. And I always wanted to do some kind of a venture of some sort. It was always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And I started working at a roller disco.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what really changed my life in a lot of aspects, because I applied for every job there except for the DJ position. I was scared to talk to the public. I was just terrified. So I applied for everything, skate rentals and door and all that stuff. But I was taught how to do all the music and everything, and taking a real chance, because what happened there was the main manager taught me how to do all the music, and one day I started mixing all my songs, and then he came up, he's like, "Hey, you're doing it." And I'm like, this is pretty awesome. And then that place really affected me. Like, it was huge, because that rink eventually ended, and because it got sold. But then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go do something else. But in the meantime, of course, I had that mindset, okay, I want to do something like this again. I would open my own rink. Actually, my cousin reminded me of this one day. He goes, I remember leaving the rink when it was closed, and you're like, I'm going to open a roller disco one day. And I thought, I said that. And he's like, you said that. And I'm like, now I remember that conversation vaguely as we walked back from Stadium Station, and I'm like, it's going to be a reality one day. But I knew I had to do other things in the meantime, so I got into like even wholesaling. So I started buying stuff and just selling it, and we're talking everything you can get yourself through wholesalers. So
I think one of the things that we have definitely talked about here on the show is obviously, I think you know a bit about some of the premise of the show. A lot of, we did an episode where basically I came out and said, why is there so many entrepreneurs in jail?
Yeah.
And you and I had at length outside of this episode, we've had discussions about this.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I'm picking up from what you were saying right away is that we look at money like it's our inventory.
Yes.
And we use that money to go and buy the things that will bring us 10 or 15% income on the things that we buy. The subject matter of what we're buying really doesn't matter. What matters is that we look at that bank account or that income, that money that's there. How can we double that money from buying, like you said, you pick up a Kool-Aid packet for like what, 25, 35 cents.
Absolutely.
And you went and turned that thing around for like $5-10, right? Like,
exactly.
That's how we looked at things from a very early age, right?
Absolutely.
So as you were building what we would call your upfront capital, what were the things that you had learned the most from having to buy wholesale this, that, or the other thing that was a long life lesson, like something that kept almost in perpetuity, kept teaching you almost? Oh,
well, I kind of created a marketplace at a young age, and so I kind of followed that wave. That was the key. And that was the big thing. That's why people ask me how you get out of the Kool-Aid stands, because when we're 18, we're drinking Kool-Aid no more.
Yeah.
So I started hosting even nightclub parties, actually. That's another thing I started doing.
Oh, wow.
And what happened there, the clubs actually stopped booking me because we made the parties too big. And we always took venues that were unique and different. We hosted different types of parties. We didn't know what the traditional everybody else was doing. And I remember one time we went to go book again. The club was like, yeah, we can't book you because you make the parties too big. We bring you too many people was the problem. But
so was it that it was exceeding the capacity of what the room could hold?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
We could pack a Monday night, like solid.
Wow.
And I had a very creative way of doing it, bringing people through, and just know how to. The biggest thing I realized was understand psychology of people and how to make that event impactful. So I kind of started with what the event's going to be. I started actually with the venue itself, the impact I could push, and then how we promote that event throughout the night. And even the people we used to promote that event was all essential. Every piece was vital.
So in this route of self-starting, you had the roller disco?
Yeah, the roller disco was a big part of my life, because what happened there was I was working all my various jobs, doing what I was doing, because from there I got into, right out of high school, I got a real estate license, started doing real estate, and my family at that time was building homes. And the market wasn't that good that time. So, and you're really young at the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to really get established. So then I got into financial planning. And then from there, I got scouted to go do work for insurance sales. So I started doing all that. But then in the back of my head, I always had my plan to open up a roller disco. So I was constantly looking at spaces, doing different things. And I did take a run. First run, actually, I had 2 rinks. A lot of people don't know that. My first rink was a complete failure. The place was only for 2 months. What happened was we signed a bad deal. Like, we were so young, so naive. We financed the thing on credit and everything. And what happened was we had signed a sublease because you wanted so bad. And the person we were paying rent to, well, he wasn't paying rent. Simple as that. And all of a sudden, we got the people coming in, slapping notice on the door, getting phone calls. We didn't know what's happening. And we had no choice but to close the place after 2 months. And a lot of time, money, of course, went into all that. Started from scratch completely. And so I remember I was living at home that time. So then what my real big starter point from there was our family friend. He had an old house. He's like, hey, for my uncle, Sonny from Clinch Fight Shop. He's the one that he's talked to me one day. He's like, there's a house that's for sale. And I'm like, before I could even say anything, he's already on the phone making the deal. And so I go and I look at the house. It's nothing special. It needed a bulldozer. But, I bought that property. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do something, right?
Yeah.
And then, again, I tried to open the rink. And I was actually on the fence with that house, to be honest with you. Then what happened was, before I bought that, I was going to open a rink again. I thought, okay, open this rink at another location. Because many years later, I got everything figured out together. I did some networking, met different people. And I developed a whole new business plan based on all the mistakes that I made the first time. I learned, okay, you know what? That's the biggest thing. You can make mistakes, but if you don't learn from anything, what's the point? You got to learn. I disclosed. So we talked about a little bit about successes and failures with my co-host Kenny on the last episode from last week, basically. And one of my biggest failures was I tried to set up almost like a hiking website where you could find out trail conditions, so on and so forth, what it was like that season. So like that kind of an idea. Why it ended up not going was because I was always talking about trips that I had already did, and I was going back out to do again. Nobody wants to hear what you've done. They want to hear what you're going to do. That's
right. And so when I saw that, I mean, it was a failure, but I learned many, many things about social marketing because of that.
Absolutely.
And again, when you're talking about those like that, it's not. We call it failures, but I think at the end of the day, if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't gotten our teeth kicked in, we would have never really learned to stay the path and just rebrand and try something else.
Absolutely.
Like in the same venue.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because I've seen many, many people come in and try something and then get scared about, oh, well, it didn't work. But their idea is good. The circumstances around their idea is shitty. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And I see that a lot of times. Like, I'm going to give a shout out, but I'm going to be brutally honest about this restaurant. And I love these people to death. So here in Edmonton, we'll get into a little bit of business in this context, because I think this is almost what entrepreneurs do in the context of ideas.
Absolutely.
So here in the Edmonton area, we have a cafe called the Remedy Cafe.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And the Remedy Cafe is a very, very successful cafe. I would consider it an East Asian flair. They serve chai teas, East Asian food of wide variety. And there's no real competition against them in this city. They almost have a free reign. Every one of their cafes is completely full.
That's true. Very unique.
So if there's something that I always want to see as a venture capitalist, is I like to see competition in every restaurant niche out there. This way, there's many opportunities for the customer, and this allows for two people to at least be competitive, and then prices become sometimes a little bit more accommodating for the customer. Anyways, I was at a restaurant. I'll throw their name out there. It was Swagat, I think is what it was called.
Oh, yes.
Swagat is how I would Englishly say that. I'm probably mispronouncing that, and my apologies. but they could probably hold a candle in the wind to Remedy. I've tried their food.
Oh, excellent.
It's very Napoleon-y food.
Yeah.
Right? It's they've got momos. They have food that I would say is 100% better than Remedy by far. They were to throw in a cafe bar. You and I both know throwing in a coffee bar, tea bar, whatever it is the way to go. I mean, especially in that niched market.
It's very casual. People like that.
And you push your hours later. Do not try to turn that kind of idea in this market, anyways, in Edmonton, into a nightclub idea. It just won't work. But their location sucks. They're up against a pizza parlor and a Chinese restaurant right next door to them, and they have no traffic. The only traffic they have is on the traffic circle on 118th off of 118th Avenue here in the Edmonton area. And the problem with that is nobody sees them. Now you look at all the other restaurants that were there before. Well, they survived for 2 years because that's the lease term. That's why
that's true.
They had no choice. These poor people, it just seems to me, and I may be alluding, but it seems to me that they've put up the family farm, so to say, because this is their first business. They put up the family farm in order to get this restaurant going. And as a venture guy, I'm looking at this thing going, look, you guys need to be on 108th Street where Good Earth Cafe used to be. Take that place. I don't give a shit what the lease is. Get your ass in there, and you turn this place that you're leasing into basically your wholesale food making operation, because you don't have a huge kitchen down at those other locations. And this is how you need to turn it out. You can't turn it out where you're going to have everybody in the back room in every location. You need to go to other locations and make this place that's dead for foot traffic a majority of your push out revenue. So like your push out services, in the context of that's where all your deliveries come from. That's where you prep all of your food to go to the other locations that you're opening. And I swear to you, Amith, if they were to pull that, they would they would be a true competitor next to Remedy Cafe in this city. Because there is nobody. I mean, you put Remedy up to Starbucks. Anybody will go to Remedy before they go to Starbucks.
That's true.
It's just the accessibility, right?
That's true.
So again, back to that idea of starting off your business, and you look at these guys and you're like, should I so want to help you? But in the same context, when these people are first starting their businesses, they don't want to hear this stuff because it scares them, right? They just realize they signed a 2-year lease, shitty location, and you hope to God that if it goes sideways, God willing it doesn't, for whatever, you just hope it doesn't. And if it does go sideways, they have enough gumption to stay the course, open another restaurant. But the likelihood of finding that capital is very, very difficult after the first failure.
Very
right?
true. Very true. And no, absolutely. That's when you, as you were talking to me, I realized until today that rink was not just first time shot. It wasn't second time. It was third time.
Yeah.
3 times, because I went, because even before I considered that piece of property, what happened was and it just reminded me, I looked at opening that rink in another building. So I went and was working, or got a job. I say, I got to build my capital back up. I got to see what I can do and try to link up with a potential capital investor. So my dad used to own a nightclub many years ago, as I mentioned, and then I reached out to the realtor that had worked with him. He really enjoyed talking to my dad and stuff. I was like very young. So then he actually did line me up with somebody. However, I remember we went and everything looked really promising. We went and I got the financing. Everything was all ready to go. However, and I'd signed the lease. I had turned around, got the contractors ready to go. Everything was planned right to a T. I got a call, and that was the bank. The bank said, unfortunately, we got some bad news because the documentation wasn't properly filled out from the banker who did it, because that banker normally does not-for-profit, doesn't do those type of loans. And they were doing more as an exception for the client. And they're like, please tell me you didn't cash a check, because if you cash a check, I will lose my job. And I could have just been and cashed it, but I couldn't do that to somebody.
Yeah.
I just can't. I'm like, you know what? I told her, look, it's not cashed. I'm not going to cash it. You can come and grab it, because I just don't want it. She's like, we can send a courier out. I was devastated. And but that's when I kind of scaled back. And then what happened then is that's when the house opportunity, I was like, I'll just jump on it. I went and bought that property. What else could I do? And but I'm glad I did, because there were many times when I bought that house, I sat there in the middle of the living room, my hands on my head, thinking, what did I do? Look at this place. It needs a bulldozer. But you know what? That place was a big foundation to everything I've done after furthermore. So after that, what I did was I turned around. I got a job again working in different industries. And insurance was actually where I ended up landing, because I ended up becoming an insurance agent, but from there I became an insurance underwriter, which was a real blessing.
Oh, yeah.
Because you get really fine-tuned with details and technicalities, and I was completely fresh when I went in. And so I'm kind of glad the path took me this way, because I'll tell you why. What happened was that time came to open the rink again. So I was working the business plan and everything, and then one of my good friends, he's like, hey, listen, you got to put that stuff away. He goes, you've done as much as you can. He goes, you need to just focus on your life now. Just go do other stuff.
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I was about 28 then. And I was like, okay. So I put everything away. And then all of a sudden what happened was I thought, okay, let me start for scouting for locations instead. Because you stop working on it unless you find a location, then pick up again. So then I started calling to different places, and I called this mall up and down the north side, Abbotsford Mall. And the owner, or the lease agent at the time was like, you know what? I think there's a better spot fit for you, probably in the old grease spot, the old military base. I'm like, really? She goes, yeah, there's a lot of old buildings there that people don't know about. And so I'm like, okay. So I went and looked, and I'd called, but it was an easy journey so far, because what happened was I turned around and I had the original agent I was using didn't do a very good job. So you know what? I went and I looked at other buildings on the base there, and the first building I seen was just massive. I was like, you know what? This is not going to make sense. It's a good idea. However, they're trying to compare things of what Calgary used to have, because Calgary used to have rinks called Lloyd's before, and it was massive. But they were built back in the 60s during the heyday of roller skating. Yeah. And even the original sports were built during the heydays. But you had to build something for today's market that fits what's happening today.
Yeah, scales of economy.
Absolutely. So, and I know a lot of people were looking at those locations. So he showed me at various buildings. Then we got into the car, and ready to leave, and I was like, you know what, this is not right. So I got out of the car, I went and talked to the agent. I said, listen, I appreciate you taking me around. However, it's not what I'm looking for. I need something about this big, and I had all the dimensions explained to him. He goes, let me show you something that no one's looked at. It's right here on this base. So he took me for a drive. I got into the building. We first walked, and it's kind of a maze, and I stood there, and I'm looking around. I'm like, this is going to be it. This is going to be Sports Trail, Northgate, Grease Spot. This is what it's going to be. But was it easy? Still not yet. We're not clear yet. And then what happened was, even midpoint, we're trying to get the funding. They're going back and forth on it, but then it did get approved. However, the biggest hurdle I think we had there was my own self, because originally I was thinking to keep my job at the same time.
Oh, no.
And I was going to open the rink.
Oh.
But faith stepped in, and all of a sudden what happened was I lost my job. And I remember I came in on a Monday morning, and they said, we need to talk to you. And when someone says we need to talk, it's never good.
Yeah.
And so then I went in, and they pretty much, long story short, is they hired someone to do my job for half the money they're paying me. However, I remember I was driving home. I called my best friend up. I'm like, hey, listen, you know what? I go, I lost my job. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. He goes, but you don't seem too upset. I'm like, yeah, for some reason I don't. Something's going to come up. I was going to go back to my property, the house I picked up.
Yeah.
And I was painting it. I was like, you know what? Something's going to happen. I'm not sure what yet. And so long story short, I ended up opening that rink. And that rink was actually quite successful. And the reason being was I didn't give up on the idea. I understood all the factors. Yeah. And even when I went in to get my financing, I was very transparent with the banker, and I explained to her, I go, listen, she liked the business plan. Everything was very solid. I said, I got to tell you something. I had a rink before this, and it didn't work out. But here are all the reasons why it didn't work out. I've learned a lot of lessons from all this. And I know I've taken everything into consideration. I go, there's no guarantee, but I feel that I'm in a much better position to do this. And she looked at me and she goes, you know, we actually based this application on a number of factors. And she goes, I'm very glad you mentioned all that stuff to me. And I remember that day I even got the call when I got that rink actually was approved. I was with my cousin, we're driving, and she calls me and she said, hey, can you talk? I'm like, sure. I pulled over to the side, and she's like, I got some news to tell you about your loan application. And she's just trying to build up that whole thing. I'm like, tell me yes or no. You're being very monotone. And she's like, it's been approved. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. And I still remember it to this day, clear as a bell. But yeah, I opened that roller skating disco. And I think if I didn't lose my job at that time, it made me work harder, more aggressive. And on top of it, I was very focused. People even asked me, what was the key to that business? And I said to people I was very dedicated. It was one thing my uncle taught me. He goes, see, look at all of us. He goes, myself, your dad, all of us uncles, we've done well. He goes, but we are a jack of all trades, but master of none. He goes, my recommendation is take one thing and be really good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I realized it just stuck in my head. So when I opened that roller disco, that's all I was doing. I was like very engaged with people. I was very engaged in my business. And at the end of the day, there's big overheads on there.
Yeah.
But you don't think about it, because the big thing was I was passionate about this business.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. And plus I was open to listening to people, getting ideas, because a big thing I did was I talked to the other rinks that were throughout Canada were very successful. And they gave me all the insight and knowledge. They're more than happy to share. That's how the industry was. And they gave me tons of insight, plus the other people I'd met and discussed things with, and I learned how to. And one thing was with that rink, I built it not to build a job. I built it to build a business. When I first started with it, I knew that how it's going to run. I had a vision in my head. I'm okay, we're going to have all these different people running this place and all these different positions. But in the meantime, I had to work all things myself to figure it all out. And that was where it all kind of started. And
you know, I can actually empathize with that. So my last paying job, I was a geomatic technician.
mm-hmm.
I had a long fall in my active addiction, and the last firm I worked for, they laid me off 2 days after my birthday. Unbeknownst to them, they're just, housing market went for crap here in Edmonton, and that was it.
Yeah.
So then I went into the not-for-profit world and for-profit. So I started FA, financial advising. And then I went into the not-for-profit world, and the financial advising I was doing on the side while I was a geomatic technologist at that time. So I had always, my first investment ever in the stock market, I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
So somebody took my first $100 that I saved up, put it on Landor Resources. Battle Mountain Resources was my first penny stock I ever bought. And they were supposed to come up with a gold find that never ended up happening, and I lost $100. Long story short, that's where I started really looking at the market. So I've been looking at the market since I was about 10, really, and understanding how to assess. But regardless of that, when I went into the not-for-profit world, I too was looking for housing for my clients, because I really believe in this idea of one of my not-for-profits for sure. But what I came to recognize really quickly, the difference therein lies between a not-for-profit and a for-profit is a not-for-profit takes a long time to mature. It takes forever for it to mature. Whereas with a for-profit entity, it takes time and it takes whittling, but when it happens, it happens.
That's true.
With a not-for-profit, it takes a long time, and the journey is small, and then it's bigger, and then it's bigger, and then it's bigger. And what I'm starting to find is a lot of people in the not-for-profit sector right now who are starting out are wanting to be this Bill Gates of not-for-profit. They don't understand that he came from something to make it. And so there needs to be that financial backing. Like you had said, you worked a regular job before jumping into your first business. A lot of people miss that. They just think, well, it'll work out in the end. No. I mean, I've been the guy doing financial advising, running a not-for-profit, and working a part-time job at the same time, because that's what it takes if that's your vision.
Absolutely.
That's the whittling that happens. But just like you were saying too, so last year we were given by Modern Gravity some floats. And when I went into this float, it was almost like an epiphany had happened. When I was just laying there, and I was thinking about this podcast and all the stuff that's happened without us really working the podcast. A lot of stuff has come because of this Life on Life's Terms entity. And I realized in that moment, I really need to put more of my time and devotion into this thing. And now it's just starting to roll with the momentum. And we didn't do this to create jobs. Just like you were saying, we created Life on Life's Terms because we felt that it was a good way to disseminate some sort of positivity into the stream of life.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of things that come from the route of addiction, incarceration, reforming your life and changing your life that's applicable to many, many people out there. And this was the reason why we felt Life on Life's Terms was a niche that's a niche in every sector of our lives, whether it be from politics to your physical fitness to your mental health to any part of your life. We can really talk about anything here on these mics. And so, like I said, we didn't come into this thing looking for a job. We came into this thing looking to be able to do what we do while keeping it minimal. Because I've learned the business plan, like you said, of something with a huge overhead. And that's a headache every time you look at it.
Is it ever?
It's like, oh my God, right? And then something like this, in the podcast, there's very, very little overhead. Like,
that's true, yeah.
Like it's like $30 a month for anybody who really wants to start out there, you know? So that being said, but what, those are the two differences, but what's the same thing that keeps happening is it's just enjoyable to do. I would rather be doing this than working at the dollar store, you know, or flipping burgers at McDonald's or something. Right. Yeah. And so is it better for me to put my effort into this? Yeah. Like it's best to be putting my effort into these things. So after the roller rink, what was the second business venture that you went into?
Well, after the roller disco, what happened was, you know, a key thing I always tell people when you're in business, you know, the party's not going to always be there forever.
Yeah.
Everything comes to an end. So you got to make sure. So I had a couple people involved with me and they're like, let's do some other side investments. And so as a result, from the different investments for real estate and all, I was able to focus on my consulting practice. I've been in development mode for a long time. And what really honestly gave me the final real boot to get it started was actually your phone call when you requested me to actually come here.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why, because I've been working on this website for a long time. I thought I was going to develop originally a 4-piece module. And then I started, when you asked me, I have so many things going on my plate, but I'm thinking, you know what? This is not a bad opportunity. And I go, because my biggest vision really now is to help other people. That's my goal. I go, because I know how it feels to be a visionary. I know when you have a passion. And my goal is to get people to be in a place in their mindset so they can do whatever it is. Because I've talked to some people where I tell people, the 9 to 5 may not be my grind, but I have nothing against it because some people actually enjoy it. I've met people that have been very successful in different businesses. Now they're like, and they're working, believe it or not, at places like McDonald's stuff. They go, I'm like, why are you doing that? I go, this because, you know, it gives you something to do. And I actually just enjoy it. And I'm like, that's the key. I go, because all these jobs that I realized one day, I go, there's some people who actually really enjoy those jobs.
Yeah.
And I go, it'd be nice to get people to a place where people can kind of do things out of choice.
Yeah.
And that's when all this started to kind of come into play for me. So with the consulting practice, I was developing all this insight and knowledge throughout the years. And I was like, you know what, I gotta do this. I want to help people because I know that feeling of sense. Because you look at the world, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening, and change happens within your own backyard. And I think if you can start to make little things happen, then ripples start happening, start taking place. Like when you asked me to come on the show, I'm actually very flattered and I appreciate it. And then I was like, you know what, this is great. Now it's going to give me a chance to kind of get my program together, and believe it or not, give me a certain sense of peace of mind. No, okay, now this is now ready to be launched. Yeah, and I can now start helping people, because that's what I really, my real forte is. Everything else I've done in between, like I enjoyed the roller disco, all that stuff, and it was my time. But now this is my real passion is, because even now I'm working on various committees and stuff. I'm volunteering time because there's North Edmonton's got certain grant funding for certain areas where they're revitalizing communities. So I'm sitting on these committees now and I'm helping reshape these communities, and I'm feeling really good about it because I tell people it's not going to just affect one thing, it's going to affect everybody, because we all got choice. And some people unfortunately can't live in certain areas for whatever reasons, but I go, they have a choice of at least being able to have a nice, safe neighborhood, and they should have that. So I figured let's start to change things piece by piece. But it's more than just painting a building or doing things. You got to deal with social issues and stuff like this. We've talked many times before, and I said, you know what, this is a good fit, and that's why I'm really fortunate. I'm actually quite excited to do what I'm doing, because even some of the community I'm working on that development stuff, it's a lot of just helping and creating change.
And I agree. I mean, I think it comes that kind of move, right? When we go from being a capitalist, so to say, to somebody who is willing to spread a couple pennies. Because there was that time I remember in my earlier career of doing this, I would split. I could make a beaver sing on a coin. You know what I mean? Like that's what it was, right? So, and now, I mean, I'm not going to say finances are finances. I don't really struggle like the way that I used to, but it is what it is, right? Do I have more time to devote? 100%. But that's the fruit that comes from doing what I had did before.
Exactly.
That's and to be this young, to be able to do that is a huge benefit, right? I mean,
I agree.
I deal with youth in corrections and high risk youth quite often right now, in some of the reach outs that I do with addictions, and these kids, they're out there slinging dope, high risk, very little reward. They didn't understand how to look at their money like it's an inventory. They get that. They get a lot of the business models that we talk about in the 101s of what a business is. And the only problem is they're disadvantaged because they're marginalized. You and I had talked about, and let's see, we'll even throw out a name. So let's throw out a name like the Mulrooneys. You look at Ben Mulrooney. It didn't take him very long to become a very successful entrepreneur, and he was on Canadian TV, so on and so forth. Well, what's the reasoning for that? A lot of that is because, he's a Mulrooney. Same thing with Justin Trudeau. He really didn't have to do much, and then all of a sudden he becomes Prime Minister of Canada. Why? Well, because he's a Trudeau, right? So when we're talking even about people in the business world, and we're talking like not far from in the business world, like the people who are millions dollars rich, or even hundreds of thousands and the upper hundreds of thousands dollars rich. That's all a click. It's all a lot of it is all connected. It's all pieced together, and there's a very small portion of people that came from the ghetto of your town, scratched, clawed, fought, and got there. It's like maybe 5 or 10% of it. But the reality is you take those people, in my opinion, those junior entrepreneurs, I call them the farm. You take those kids out of the farm and you put them against any other kid coming out of university, and you get them to pitch for the life, so to say, and that kid coming out of the farm is going to be way better than that kid coming out of university.
Their experience is much more vast. They could look at all variables, not just when the world's a pretty place to be in. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. What you made a very good point, because sometimes what happens is, like we were talking earlier about the business ventures and stuff, if everything was always successful every step of the way, all the skills I have, I would not have learned them all, because if everything keeps coming easy to you, then you will never learn all those things. But you learn through all the trials and tribulations, and you actually need to learn how to even cope with things better. Mm-hmm. Because even somebody called me one day, and one of my friends, she's like, "You seem so calm and collected. Do you ever have those days where you're like, screw it?" I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. I go, you know what? We all have those days, but at the end of the day, I kind of regroup myself, think, okay, what am I going to do best? And just like with all those people you're talking about, a lot of the young kids, and I see them sometimes, I'm thinking, what happened? Because even at my roller disco, I had a mix of all types of people coming through the doors, and dealing with youth and stuff was part of our component there too. And sometimes just talking to them and figuring out, giving them a little bit of direction. And that's everything I've seen, and everything as I'm talking to you, I realized where the path I'm on today, all the stuff I did in the past has kind of led me to this thing, because I'm like, you know what? I see it. There's something there. You can be really something big, and you could maybe be the next person we need that could help make a big influence, but you need someone to encourage. And I go, it's our obligation for people that have already kind of achieved certain goals. And I live very simplistic. I'm a very simple, a minimalist person, but I'm like, you know what, now I'm able to, at least at this point, I'll contribute back and give them something more very valuable, which is knowledge and insight, and help them be the best person they can be, because who knows what they can accomplish. And
Kenny and I, the co-host here, we talked about this many times. The only thing that these kids have fucked up, they got twisted in their head, is this: they're looking at depriving society because they feel owed, as opposed to contributing to society, because none of us is owed a damn thing.
Absolutely.
Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, nobody is owed a damn thing by society.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the, if you will, the grapes of wrath story that everybody who's coming from poverty feels is you have that taste of, but it was so hard up to now.
The excuses. Yeah, that's the big thing. You know what? And that's what I want to hear things sometimes. And I tell people, you know what? You can either make a solution or make an excuse.
Yeah.
And I tell people about complaining, I go, you know what? I go, do I complain? Absolutely. But I also have a solution with my complaint. I'm like, I don't like this, but I think we should do this, and I'll even fight for that.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, because you're right. You made a very valid point. Everybody kind of sometimes thinks, well, because of this and because of that. Yeah, there are certain circumstances, no doubt, but you have to kind of figure out where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. And I think if you have a passion to drive, and key thing with that is surround yourself by people that remind you that all the time.
Yeah, I think, well, you and I had discussed at one time, we were just sitting there basically shooting the shit over at Sonny's.
Yeah.
And we were literally just talking about business ideas. And if there's anything that I have come to understand, it's that entrepreneurs need to be around entrepreneurs in order to feel that vibe.
Absolutely.
But like your cousin Sonny had also said to me too, he said, the other piece to that is this. He said, some people just have really bad ideas.
Absolutely.
And you have to be honest enough to say, look, that's maybe not the path you want to go down. And so I kind of want to backtrack to like when you had said that your friend had basically said to you, look, man, if you can find a location, go ahead with it. Was that, because it almost sounded like to me like he was saying, look, it's not moving forward. Move on with your life a little bit, because you were 28 years old. But then you continuously looked for a location. So was he kind of nudging you like, okay, Amith, it's time to see what else is out there?
Oh, actually, no. In that situation, he was more so was when I do something, I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, there's more things you could be doing right now. And he goes, you've done as much as you can at this point. He still felt the idea was valid. It was good. But the thing was, he goes, you're just kind of grinding the stone at this point where you're at.
Yeah.
You can't go any further right now. So there's no point. Just keep grinding, because what that can do is lead into frustration. And so it goes, next step is find that location. Because once you find that location, then you can now move to the next chapter.
That's kind of, we call it parking in the not-for-profit world. We'll park the idea for right now.
Absolutely.
And then wait for it. And that's why I say in the not-for-profit world, things become so mature because of that. Because you're always parking the idea and going, okay, let me come back to it. Especially if you have a not-for-profit, and I'm gonna put this out to anybody out there who's looking at the not-for-profit sector. If you are looking for buildings or revenue to come from buildings, you have to wait until the market is a buyer's market.
Absolutely.
You do not want to be a not-for-profit trying to put together an investors group to get you a property when it's at its height. That's just, it's silly to do. You have to wait for a recession. That's when most people become successful in property, is when recession time comes around and everybody's losing their properties because they can't make their mortgage payments or whatever it is, and there's foreclosures. It's a really crappy business to be in, but in that regard, because you are basically, as I like to call them, short bettors. They're betting against it as opposed to betting with it. So that's kind of the feeling that you have. You're picking up the scraps from other people. I know, because I'm in that business right now. And that's what it feels like. However, I'm turning it around for people to utilize as a stopgap. They're using it in order to get out of a predicament, to go to the next more beneficial predicament.
Absolutely.
So in that context, it kind of balances out in my mind.
Yeah, it's true.
I used to be a capital venturist where I was like, screw them. I'm just going to take the property, flip it, make more money. I'll sit on it. I'll rent it until it's ready to be sold when the market is up again. And I used to look at it that way. And now I really don't care. Mm-hmm. I just don't care. So in that regard, I think that's the other thing too, is to become honest with your entrepreneurial friends, so to say, and be like, look, your idea is great, but show me.
Absolutely.
Show me where the market is, and I'll show you the money. I'll show you how to do it. And if there's one thing that I recognize that you were saying was the marketing tools that you have from being a realtor, from being from marketing your the roller rink, and just that ability to be able to do that. Or even you were saying you had so many people coming into these events that the building couldn't even withstand it. Let me ask you, where did the marketing aptitude come from? Like, how did that happen for you?
Just understand the whole marketing concept.
Yeah.
That really came from from that roller disco, now I think about it, when I first started working at that original sports world, the one by a stadium, you have to entertain the crowd.
Yeah.
That's the key. Because if people put their hard-earned money into a place, you got to figure out what is going to get their attention. That's the biggest thing. And I remember too now, as I kind of go back, is because I remember when I first started working there was this one guy that worked there. He was doing well with the ladies, very popular. Myself, not so much. I came in, I had my corduroys. They were like flood pants. I had these square sweater. I even told him, I go, man, I got to tell you, it's pretty impressive. He looks at me, I'll be straight up with you. Because everything else is fine, but the packaging, you need to get rid of those clothes, man. That stuff is funny looking. And I'm like, whoa. But you know what? So then I realized, now you mention it, that's where marketing became. So I said, okay, you know what? The inner part is cool. I'm already fine. So then I turned around. I remember that day clear as a bell. The next day I went and did all this shopping, went all these clothes stores and bought all this new clothing stuff, took everything I had, my old stuff, and I packed it all into a bag and dropped it off. I thought, well, let some other sucker have it. But you know what, maybe, they'll learn a lesson like I learned from all this. But the fact that I'll never forget that day as I stood inside the LRT station, and there were girls that came from the rink. They were standing in there, and they're waving like, oh my, is that you? And then I was like, wow, what an impression. As a result, I already had certain things inside me, but that confidence kind of railed to another level. Yeah. And even being in high school, and same thing, that because I trusted when I was going to high school, the same thing happened because I was working there. And I'll never forget, I was at my locker, and then this one girl walks up to me, and she's like, I tell you, you're a pretty much a big nerd when I first seen you. Then she came up to me and she grabbed my jacket. She'll be, you're looking pretty fine nowadays. And I started laughing, and I was like, how about that? And so that's when I realized, now I think about it in my head, is when the marketing aspect, I'm like, hey, you know what? You got to kind of position things certainly to get the reactions you want. And plus, even the person I was dating at the time, I remember, or actually, this is after, but she told me one day, she goes, you know what kind of woman are you trying to attract? Because that time I started wearing like more the hip hop wear and stuff, right? And I go, well, she goes, you know what? You like the business type of women. So I noticed you dress more the business attire. That's what attracted me to you. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So I was thinking, okay, this is a beautiful girl giving me advice. I think maybe I should listen to her.
Yeah.
I go, I'm obviously your market.
Yeah.
And so, it's very important to hear what they got to say. And I think the biggest thing is, it was listening to the people. That's what that tied in with, because even when I had my roller disco, I would watch things and understand people. And I'm like, you know what? People are needing escape in this crazy world sometimes. So it's our job to figure out how do we trigger all these things, right? And
I learned that too, even with the podcast. So we used to so our show comes out, or this show comes out every Thursday, Friday of the week. Well, why? Because most people by the end of the week are done with the work week.
Absolutely.
And so this also allows people to listen to the show over Saturday and Sunday if they don't get it on Thursday, Friday. So when do we tell people that the show is brand new and out? Thursday morning between 7 and 10.
That's
so you'll see all of our Instagrams go out at about 7:30 in the morning. Why? Well, because most people are sitting on the toilet taking a shit, looking at their Instagram or their Twitter.
Absolutely.
Right? And then when they get to work, they're looking at their Facebook at about 9:30. So then that's when we do our shout outs on Facebook saying that the blog is done. So because there's two parts to the show. There's the podcast, which is this, and then there's the blog, which is the afterthought, which I'll write about this show afterwards. This way, anybody who wants in on the show, they can think about or they can read about kind of my afterthoughts. Remember, do you remember Jerry Springer back in?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay, so Jerry Springer always had this thing at the end of his show called My Final Thought.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's kind of the blog. So it's the final thought after the show, so that we can kind of unpack everything that we talked about over the course of the time that we were talking. And one of the things that I've recognized by marketing in that way is it's to the right and up. Absolutely. Every week that we keep doing that. And it's more so the reason why we keep doing that is because we want as many people to hear this information as possible. Right? We're not here selling anything. I mean, the shout outs that we have from our sponsors is because those are products that we actually use here on the show. Okay. And we would endorse anybody else to go and use them. You know what I mean? We're fortunate enough that they say, here's a couple bucks, that's what it is. Right. And it helps us keep the mics open for us to keep this show going.
Absolutely.
And so again, in that marketing piece, to see that's how much of a difference that makes. Or when we get on Twitter and I don't know, I'll be talking about addictions on Twitter with somebody and they'll say, well, where's your full formed idea? And I'll go, lifeonlifesterms.libsyn.com/whatever. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, wow. And then you hear on the show, there's also a blog afterwards that you can go check out. It allows people to really form that idea that, we're not just sitting here talking out of our ass.
Absolutely.
Kenny and I, we've gone through life experiences that attribute to what we know about addictions, business, things of this nature, right? Currently, I'm dealing with my weight, so a big part of my blogs right now is about dealing with obesity and getting past obesity, and the things that we have to do in my nutritious world in order to accommodate probably unhealthy eating habits that I have. Right, going from being a martial arts fighter to what I look like today is a far cry of what I used to be, right? Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, this is all the process of saying we can do this, but this is where Life on Life Terms kind of fits in all of these capacities.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I totally agree. Yeah, and that's a big thing you're doing. And see, one thing with everything you've put together with the podcast is you're giving people, a reason.
Yeah.
And and that's the thing I always tell people in business. I see so many times people open their doors and do different things, and they expect, well, I'm open, and I'm like, no more than that. Give them something.
Yeah.
And the one thing I remember I used to do at the rink on Saturday afternoons, I go in there, and I tell the DJ, step over. I'm going to do the music now. Last 4:00, we close at 4:30, and 20 minutes. I would take 2 minutes of 10 songs. And I would pick the best songs possible. And what I did is I noticed the room as it starts to fill up towards that time because all the moms start coming in to pick up their children. I thought, okay, this is a very big opportunity because, it's been stressful for the moms because, they slap 10 kids up on roller skates or on concrete floors or skating, and the whole thing is very much pressure. The husbands come, they're very good box holders, but they're not really worried about nothing. they hold a cake, but you see the women stressed. Like, you need to give them a moment.
Yeah.
And other moms start showing up. So you have 10 birthday parties, you got 10 moms already there, plus you got other moms showing up. There's almost like 30 to 40 women standing there. So I do this for them. And I'd be like, okay. Because being a mom isn't easy, I'll tell you that. So I give props to all the moms out there. Like, it's, they're like gold. And this moment's for you. And I take these songs and I tell people sometimes, I go, watch this room. It's like foreplay. And I start putting 2 minutes of these songs out there. And I start putting them, and I'm watching the women. They're all kind of looking at each other and they start kind of moving and shaking to the music. And all of a sudden, I announce a song, okay, next one, and drop it in. And the intensity is building up more and more and more. And before you know it, you get that universal woo-hoo. I'm like, now we're looking good. Yeah. I go, but when I know I've really done my job is when the kids come up and they go, Mom, stop moving like that. Then I know I've done my job. And the mom's like, this is our jams. And they're all clicking together. And I go, that's why our clientele was so diversified and mixed. And I gave people a reason to come there. I'm like, you know what? We were in a fancy facility. We were a very basic facility.
Yeah.
I go, but the fact is that you got to give people the reasons, and I create all that energy in that room, and I connect all these different people together, and that's what it is. That's what it all boils down to. Like, that's what you're doing with what you're doing is you're making sure you connect on different levels, and that's what is so important to the people.
Thanks. We're winding down here, but I want to there's 2 more questions I have.
Sure.
One is, who is your inspiration for business?
Definitely my dad. He started off. And that's when he first came. He growing up in school when he was younger, he kind of left school early so his other siblings could go accomplish things and stay at home and worked and did different things around the house. So when he came in, it was tough being a young immigrant when he first came here. But I hear some of his stories sometimes, think, wow, you were that old, 18 years old, New Zealand, all these things you're doing. I'm like, I can't picture it because I always see him as being old,
Yeah.
But the thing is, definitely he's always been doing different ventures and different things. That's definitely where the foundation is. And of course, and Sonny's dad too, they're cousins, but they're like business partners as well. And just watching the two, it's like watching Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. It's actually quite hilarious.
Yeah. That's excellent.
They're dynamic, but I definitely say those two are the first stems right there of where it all started for me, and they're the biggest inspirations. And then after that, just taking input from everybody else, about the uncles, but those two by far were the first two.
Okay. Quintessential questions always here on Life on Life's Terms is, what do you have a daily meditation practice? And if not, are you looking to find one?
You know what? I do actually, it's very interesting you ask that question, because I do have like a daily checklist, and that's what I try and do. And it's called a daily list, daily well-being list, and a weekly list, and a monthly list I have. And do I always follow it? Absolutely not. And I go, do I feel like crap when I don't? Yes. Does it affect my creativity, my processes? It absolutely does. But the thing is, I have developed, and I think that's so essential, because what I did was I built that list based on so many things around me. Okay, you know what? These are things that can help me be together. I'm talking so basic as wake up, make the bed, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, make your lunch or breakfast, and then have all the specific vitamins I have. And of course, and I have this because, you know, I tell people, it doesn't matter what kind of business you want to do. You need to sure you have a business plan. But the biggest business you have is your life. So you better make sure you have a business plan for your life.
Yeah.
Because if you aren't taking care of that, how's everything else going to fall into place?
Yeah.
And that's the chaos, right? That people don't realize sometimes. They go, okay, I want to go do all this, because if I do this, then everything else will fork out. I'm thinking, well, if you're already running on ragged, I go, you have to use that to create a small process. That's why I live very simplified. I live in a simple, small, one-bedroom apartment. And I got all the basic amenities, but also my mindset's that way. That doesn't affect me. I'm thinking, oh, why it's a one-bedroom apartment? I'm like, I actually enjoy this one-bedroom apartment because it gives me, I don't got all my time spent cleaning and stuff. And I go, it's only me right now. I'm single, so I don't need to worry about that.
You know, what's crazy about that is Kenny and I often talk about, so like in recovery, we learn this process of starting your day. Right? So one of the process for us is typically waking up and humbling ourselves in front of a power greater than ourselves that we understand. You call it God, Allah, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. To us, it's just a representative of something that we can humble ourselves in front of. Then from there, we typically go get physical fitness. Then from there, we're emotionally stable. Then from being emotionally stable, we can be of service.
Absolutely.
Right. So you being a guy who's like a complete normie, if you want to call it normie, like it doesn't seem that you have addiction issues or any of these things. However, you still incorporated in the beginning, like Kenny and I have both said many, many times, I'm afraid of the day that I forget to make my bed. Because the day that I don't make I've been doing it so I've been sober and recovered over 5 years now. Mm-hmm. I've been making my bed every day for the last 5 years.
Oh, that's excellent.
Right? So the reason why I'm scared for the day if I were to ever forget what would happen is because that's such a huge part of my grounding, right? That has to be done before I called you and asked you to come onto the show. I know that if I make my bed right, nothing else in the day could really be all that bad because I've started out good.
Absolutely.
You know, if I go and get physical fitness, I started out good that day. You know what I mean? So one of the biggest questions that we ask ourselves on a daily contingency is, how well did you love yourself today?
Absolutely.
Because once you recognize that it's about loving yourself and running the business of loving yourself, then you have that to give away if you have that in the well, so to say.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it's amazing that you're saying, like, I have a daily routine that you look at every day, and it's just simple things like making your bed and, you know, getting things to eat. And
absolutely, because you can always add into all that stuff, and that's crucial. People don't realize it sometimes, but I go, you know, having that, it's like a certain I like structure and I don't like structure, because like when I go on vacation, I'm like, I'm here. And what's going to happen? We'll see. I go, adventure follows. But when I'm doing my day-to-day stuff, you need that to kind of get you to those places you need to be. Yeah. And there are days that I take off. Okay, that's like my Sunday. I'm going to just do nothing. Yeah. And I think I get it too. When you're in business, there's certain times you're sacrificing because, you know, there's so many things that are coming your way that, you know, you want to, if you're especially passionate about your business, you want to keep working on it, keep doing the things. And because I'm single, but there's also people that have families, that have children and spouses and stuff. So I always tell people, you know, you got to make sure you kind of make time for everything. Yeah. It's very important. And you got to be realistic with what you're going to be accomplishing, what you're doing, because what you may want to do right now may not be a priority till later. Because I have friends who have children now. Just this year, actually, they've had them, and they go, things have actually shifted and changed. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but they go, we're going to do things a little differently now. And not to be frustrated, because sometimes people get frustration. So you have to start looking things differently. So the big thing's mindset, I always tell people.
One of the big things that I got out of what you were saying was parking things. I'm currently in a place with a not-for-profit where if a property comes up, sure, we would probably jump on it. But it was blood, sweat, and bloody well tears that I put into that not-for-profit to get it to going where I thought it should go. And we were looking at a 16,400 square foot building to house 53 clients. And for whatever reason, funding fell through from the provincial government. And due to that, we just couldn't accommodate that size of a building. So we had to scale everything down and then try to figure out how else we were going to accommodate this venture, right? But to have to say, I succumbed to the idea of surrendering for the moment is difficult to bite.
It is.
Especially when you've put in, 10 shifts of 20 hours writing a grant proposal that didn't go anywhere, and then the message out there is you were something that tried to start that didn't start,
Absolutely.
And to leave it on that moment to park, to know, well, in time, this is going to change. It's very, very difficult to say, I have to walk away from the fight a little bit.
And you know what? When I had my second attempt between the rinks, I was telling you I tried. I remember that. It was 5 years. I had to walk away from that. I was like, okay, you know what? Let's just see something else is going to come up into place. So I still created the plans, worked on things, but the key thing is, I always tell people, is I get that impression. But sometimes people are like, hey, you know what? Oh, they're starting something, they're stopping, but. You know what? Sometimes some of those people, they're like the naysayers.
Yeah.
And you know what? People in business, if they hear you got a plan, they understand you got a plan, then it's cool. They get it. And it's like, even sometimes I see a lot of guys out there are dating. They're like so focused on, okay, I need to have all this image. I go, I'm gonna tell you something. I said, real women just focus on a man who's out there fighting for what he needs to do and will show that he can do what he needs to do. She doesn't even care what job you have. If you're going to vision a plan, she's down with you.
Yeah.
And I go, but I said, but you need to show her that, because they kind of expect, they should expect, and nothing's wrong with that.
Yeah.
They're the ones that make the children. And at the end of the day, you know what? They put themselves through a lot.
Yeah.
And so for them to expect that, it's not wrong. But I tell people the big thing is that, like, even when I did my rink project I was trying to put together and it wasn't coming together, I put it off to the side, I was doing other things. People around me, they go, no, we get what he's doing, and he's got a vision, he's got a plan. Even the people are dating, they knew. I was like, yeah, I'm planning to open this roller disco, this is what I want to do and stuff.
That's the hard one, is to find, well, I shouldn't say that it's hard. It's fate, if that's what you want to call it, when those people are around you that create that microcosm for you, that are kind of like your cheerers.
Absolutely.
That say, yeah, it's going to happen. It's just got to develop a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And for people to be able to not, so we talked about this, guys, from the farm, we'll say again, there's two kinds. There's the guy who has never sold drugs, and he comes from low income his entire life, saved his first $500, threw it into whatever investment he threw it into, and he's going to go down with the ship until it's down in the ocean and it's dead, and he's still holding on, right? And then there's the other guy who might have sold drugs, and as soon as there's a leak, he's already screaming for the harbors and the water swimming back, and he can't even see land, but he's gone, right? Yeah. So those are the two people, and to find that mix of group, I think, in your group, in your friends, so to say, who can tell you, you know what, it's time to chuck it, or hey, you know what, you need to hang on a little longer. It's coming. You just got to be there, and I think that happens from, entrepreneurs hanging out with entrepreneurs. It's just one of those things where I think that positivity is almost that law of attraction, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely.
And this is where I find, personally for myself, like, sure, we have the old school club called the Rotary Club, which is all these old business owners so on and so forth. And that's great. But what we don't have is a young social group of young entrepreneurs coming together to feed off of each other. And you and I had talked about the Junior Entrepreneurs Program. And I think that would be a really, really good fit for these young kids coming up once that idea decides to go forward. Because we don't have that. We don't have a forum where young people can get into a team and almost play a game that's like Shark Tank and Apprentice all in one.
Oh, that's very true, and that's the huge thing with what I'm actually even doing with the whole community development for like Baldwin and Belvedere. That's where the revitalization grant's been approved for, and that's the big thing about the whole plan. They're creating a community, and it's incorporating all the different categories of, and especially the youth, because that's the next generation of people coming forward, and we need their energy, and that is so vital. And I'm so glad now I start to see things shifting, because even the whole group that's involved, it's a mix of nationalities, ages, groups. Everything is very diversified, and that is exactly what one of the key foundations of it all is being able to, let's break something new so these new people can come in board and they can start to interject their ideas. And even myself, I know, like, I count on the youth that's 10 years younger, generation below. I'm counting on you guys. So I'm here to kind of set things up for you guys, help you, encourage you to be the best you can be. Because, the fact is, hey, when I'm old, I make sure there's a good healthcare system to take care of me. So I'm going to encourage you as much as possible.
So let's wrap it up with Insight Focus Consulting. What is that? Where is that going?
My whole goal with that is really is to help people kind of put things in perspective. And I always tell people, if you look at life in business, and I kind of went through this whole exercise the last few days really to kind of really figure out what I'm going to do with my practice and which direction I'm going to go with. But I always tell people the key in life is being able to identify opportunities. And of course, to be able to truly identify opportunities, you need to almost create a mindset and create an incubator space. And like that being for me, like I live very simplified, all the things that I need, but it still gives me enough room to grow and relax when I need to relax. And of course, I need to work. I get to work. And understand, teach people the fundamentals before you get into anything else. Like, for example, even money, understanding it, like creating budgets and doing things like that, and knowing how to live realistically within what you've been given. Also, then you can start thinking about businesses like, okay, what is I'm going to be passionate about? What am I going to wake up doing that's going to excite me? Not just doing it for the money. I tell people, don't do it just for the money. If you do it for the money, it's not going to work out. I'm not saying it won't work out. It could possibly work out, but at the end of the day, you may be diluting yourself with other things just because you hate what you're doing so much. So what's the point of that? You might as well stick with a job. Yeah. And also kind of build a framework for people. That's my main goal. My main goal with my whole practice is to unite and inspire people, because at the end of the day, if we can get everybody in the same little platform, everyone's like feeling good about themselves, doing different things, they got a great mindset, they can start sharing knowledge, they feel like we can now step up and put our ideas forward. That's when change really happens, because everyone's got a different sets of skills, different contacts, because that's a huge thing too. You always hear the thing, being connected. Well, that's how you connect people. Yeah. And I think by breaking down the barriers and explaining things to people, even as I do stuff with the committee, it's all about breaking down barriers of people, of nationalities and various things, and even your own mindset sometimes, because you are yourself can be your worst enemy. And I've been there many a times. And do everybody fights it? Absolutely. Do I still fight? Absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I don't. Yeah. And even one person I mentioned, I was doing this whole practice on eventual launch, because sometimes if people do it to help themselves, I'm so glad you said that, because I'd be lying to say if I wasn't. And it's been very therapeutic for me. Yeah. And so my whole goal, really, it's going to be eventually when I'm fully up and running, it's going to be a 4-part series where it's going to be personal development, business development, real estate investing, and renovation consulting. And the reason why I go personal development is all about yourself, getting yourself lined up and making sure you're the best person you can be, kind of getting that thing in order. Next is business development, because that's where you get the best breaks, and you can actually help bring the extra income in to do other things you want to do. And I always been a big firm believer in real estate. So I always teach people the basics of one-on-one in real estate, what you need to do and how to do it. And renovation consulting, well, that ties in with the real estate investing, because sometimes people, I know I've seen them, they buy these rental properties and they just dump so much money, and I'm thinking you went overboard. That wasn't necessarily needed. I'm gonna
unveil something.
Yes.
Just as an idea. So this was something I was actually sworn to secrecy, that I would not tell anybody this. But we'll take a pause on the business piece, because I think this idea. You might actually like this. So in one of the not-for-profits that I was working in, what we were going to do is we were going to develop an employer's piece where, let's say you never had a job before, like a legitimate job.
Mm-hmm.
We would give you a legitimate job and you would come and volunteer for us. And what we would do is we basically give you a voucher at the end of the day, which will get you a voucher so it doesn't disrupt any of your social income, any of that, but it's the voucher saying, here's your first and last month's down on your rental, new rental accommodations, and here's a voucher for new furniture at a secondhand store. Okay. But you basically volunteered for those hours to get that voucher.
Absolutely.
So it comes to you without having to disrupt somebody's social benefits from barriers to work, like some of the social programs that we have here in Canada. Now, that being said, you go out into the normal work area, and then on the weekends, we teach you how to set up your own business. But what we would do is we would incorporate you. So we would say, okay, you're a bricklayer. You've got a job now, bricklaying. And we would say after about 5 or 6 years, we see you incubating and you're working and you hold the line, so to say, until you become a journeyman. And then we would say, as this entity, we'd say, would you like your own bricklaying company? And then they say, yeah, okay, for sure. So what we would do is we would come in with a corporate structure, like McDonald's, and just plug them in and say, look, at one, you never have to pay employees because they're all volunteers. They come from us.
Yeah.
And your income for the first 3 years, because let's face it, that's the biggest overhead.
Absolutely,
right?
It is.
So for the first 3 years, you pay nobody income except for yourself. Now, every tenure that you put out or any contract that you get, we as the entity are going to take 49%. The rest is yours. All you have to pay out of that is your rent and your wages. That's it, like the rent for your office. And if you could run it out of your house, we don't care. Just make sure that you have to use our volunteer pool for your employees. This is how the not-for-profit gets paid, through that business venture with this new guy coming in. And then he learns how to do payable and receivables. He then learns how to pay himself. He then learns how to pay his taxes on his company. All the while, Big Brother, for the next 3 years, is showing him how to do this. And then the beauty of it is that 49% that he's giving the not-for-profit, because it's charity, it's all tax deductible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? So this, in that way, allows a not-for-profit to claim a bigger income without having to go to the government saying, give me money. Right? So if an entity were to ever set up in the context of being almost like a labor force, but then endorsing and developing these people to come back to them saying, we have the capital, we'll put your 3 months, we'll put the lease down on your office. Don't worry about the lease. We own 51% for the next 3 years. And then after 3 years, you can pay us out and you become your own. But over these 3 years, we have a contract where you have to use all of our employees and you don't have to pay them. That's a win-win all the way around the table.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's
right?
very innovative.
So this is the thing that I think not-for-profits really have to look at. But again, we could go on for hours about how the bigger not-for-profits don't want to see something like that happen. But you were saying, sorry, and I didn't mean to take the steam away from Insight Focus. But you were saying, so is the personal development piece, the business piece, and then what are the next two modules?
Oh, it's going to be the business piece and the real estate investing.
Okay.
And so teach people the basics of real estate. Because I've always been a firm believer of that, because I tell people, you got to live somewhere. So, right now, especially in Edmonton, I tell people go, the markets are bad. I'm like, that's the best time to invest, frankly.
Yeah.
Because you know what? When the markets are really hot, the prices really aren't even... You don't know what the fine line is, because sometimes it's being overbidded for whatever reason is. People just want it out of emotion and stuff. But right now you have a fine medium of what the economy is at. Yep. And even when you go to put a price or decide to get a rental property, you know that this is what you can willing to pay. If they will accept it or not, that's up to them. That's just what the market is. So I tell people right now, there's not so many people running up to the gate. But when the markets are hot, everyone's running to those gates, and it's tough. Yeah. And the biggest thing too after the fact is you got to do your renovations. And I tell people sometimes they renovate property, whether it's going to live in it or rental or going to flip it eventually, what their plans are. They kind of need to some direction too. So I kind of sit down with that. And everything I talk about is actually all through life experience. Not that, okay, I just came up with and never did any of this stuff. I've done every single thing. I've lost in the game. I've won in the game. But my goal is, I tell people, when you use me, I go, use me because you feel there's a value in my service. You feel that it's going to be beneficial to you. I just want your money. I want to make sure you benefit from this, and you're going to help you as a person and grow. And
do you see this ever being in a business model of being paid in perpetuity? So a lot of, and I'll just use lawyers because a lot of lawyers do this, where they'll take on people in a capacity of no money up front, and they'll say in perpetuity, you're going to pay me my fees, and if you don't, I'll take your income taxes. I'm not saying that's the way how you would go about it, but I'm just saying in that model, that's how they ensure their payment. And one of the things that I could see this vessel potentially doing is almost like the podcast. The podcast is in perpetuity. We make money later. We don't really make money right away. It's in the later times because people will listen to the show later on. And so I could almost see this in that same business model where you build people up or you build an entity up to this place and you almost give them the structure to flourish and then get paid in perpetuity by taking 2 or 3% from each entity. Have you ever thought about that?
I've considered that, but then I chose to kind of shy away from it, to be honest with you. The reason being was because once I set people up, I kind of want them to be, not to worry about anybody else.
Okay.
And my goal for myself really is just to get them to that place where they need to be. But I do encourage other things that they do.
Yeah.
Like, because there may be other situations that they can work with where they're more hands-on for specific things they need to do, and like with the ongoing skills. But my main goal really is to get them inspired, to get them to a certain place. Okay, good. Now you're up on you're standing up, you're running, and now you're pretty much on your own. You're running at this point, and that's my main focus of them, because I want them to kind of form their own thing. From that point, like I've planted a few seeds, but now all of a sudden, it's kind of like I seen this one gardener before. He used to pair plants, and I'm like, this plant had like an apple tree and a peach tree or something, and I'm like, that's pretty interesting how he did that. And he showed me how he spliced the things. I never thought I could even do this. So that's my essential goal. So this way, when I let them free, okay, we've done what we need to do, and you don't need to worry. We're good, and they do whatever they got to do. And in the future, maybe doing ventures and different things at that point. But it's one of those things where you want to take one thing at a time and not overdo too much at once, and just kind of see how things kind of organically grow.
And the last module, what? So you had personal, business, real estate, and the last module.
The renovation consulting.
Renovation consulting.
Yeah, that's a huge one, because people, like I said, they just get to go overboard sometimes, and they don't know what to do, and then or what they're not even doing things, the logistics like of what they should be doing that can actually help lower their utilities, things like that, or their comfort level. And it's only after the fact people do things. Sometimes they're like, oh, I should have done this, done that. Now it's going to cost you way more to do it now.
Yeah.
But if you do some planning, heck, even with, I tell people sometimes you can do things in phases. You can, here's what we want to do completely, but we know what we can do now, what to do later. And it's huge, because especially when people invest that much money in their properties and stuff, they realize that, they got to make sure they protect that investment.
I've always taught people, don't bank on your house to retire you.
Yeah.
That's not going to retire you, because the markets go up and they go down, and they're very volatile. The only way to gain a robust out of real estate is to buy many properties, and then when you're ready to sell out, it's one big kick. But you, along the way, have to find management that's willing to manage those properties. And that's the piece. Like, property will always bring you back your money. The issue is you have to manage those properties. And that's always the headache, I think, for a lot of people who, for instance, are a doctor. They want to help out in the community, but there's only so many management companies that they can plug into in order to run their properties, and all the while their mortgage is getting paid. However, they're not really seeing a dividend in the moment from it.
Yes.
And the perpetuity payment that's coming is hopefully the property will develop into something that's beyond what they had bought into.
Absolutely.
But that's the only way how those guys really make money, is that they've hired a management company, an asset company, to manage literally 8 to 10 properties. Most management companies won't even look at you if you don't have anything more than 4 properties. There's just no income in it for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they claim basically 2 months of rent. So they need 10 properties for each one of their property managers in order for them to pull a full income out of your properties. You know,
Yeah.
so that's the way it breaks down. And you don't want to be dealing with more than 9 doctors or lawyers who own these properties. You know what I mean? It just becomes too cumbersome. So I agree, though, that real estate will always bring you your money back. But a lot of people don't see it in that
because
vehicle.
What they do sometimes is they try and micromanage everything. And I tell people, you got to buy things at the right price points. You have to, and you can't do it personal. Like sometimes people go, well, I don't want to buy in that neighborhood per se, but I'm like, it's an up and coming neighborhood. It's more neutralized, centralized. There's exceptional value. So I go, and some people, well, I want this big fancy house. I'm like, well, there's not very much value in it.
Yeah.
Like I got friends that have some of those big homes, and you know what? But that's for their family. That's their investment. They plan to be there for the next 30 years, raise their children, have all their family functions. So that's a different story. But a lot of their investments are all in smaller homes that are like, you know what? Let's make sure we buy a house that has, say, a good lot structure. I always tell people, look at the lot, the structure, and location. So that they've got big lot sizes. They've got decent like zonings. Their structure itself, they can sometimes do 2 units in the property. They can modify things. And, of course, location, being very centralized is key. So that's the thing that people don't realize sometimes. They get caught up more with the aesthetics and more about, you know, hey, I own this place versus saying, you know, it's more about image sometimes. But they get to look at cash flow and, of course, having the right professionals in place. And biting off what you can chew, not overdoing it. That's the big thing.
Well, I think that's the kick in the teeth too, is to, especially for not-for-profit and you're trying to expand your income, is you have to play within the rules of the bylaw. Absolutely. You have to. If you do not have a bylaw that allows for occupancy of tenants, you can't have it.
That's it.
You just can't have it. It's not a property to even look at. Right now, I know in the Edmonton region we have a bunch of multifamily properties that are coming up, and a lot of them are coming for foreclosures. You know, but to change the design of what that property is in regards to how the bylaws dictate how you're supposed to manage that property, essentially. And if you want to change the agreement between you and the tenant, that you're fully allowed to do that. So like, for instance, you wanted to say mandatory urine tests in order for you to live here at a subsidized rent. If the tenant agrees to it, the tenant agrees to it. That's what it is. If you want them to go to courses, so on and so forth, outside of your building, and the tenant agrees to it, the tenant agrees to it.
Absolutely. That's
completely fine. But you still have to work within the bylaws of that building. You can't say all of a sudden we're going to start facilitating programs in this. No, you can't do that.
Absolutely.
That's
the big rule right there. People don't realize sometimes you have to work within whatever the structures are.
That's right. You can't just say, this is what I want, this is what it's going to be. No. Because then you're dealing with a bureaucratic system that's just going to kill you at the end of the day in regards to pushing that ball down the road, you know?
Yeah.
But with that, I thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, definitely. I thank you so much because you know what, you gave me that extra push I needed. So that's why I was able to get my website together, like insightfocusconsulting.com.
Excellent.
And 3 words. And but the thing is, if it wasn't for that push, and that's the big thing, is I tell people identifying opportunities, and if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now.
So what we'll do at the bottom of my blog is we'll put a pretty link up for them to go straight to your website off of the blog. I don't think I can put it on any of the podcast because I get a notice the second I do that. They're like, "Do you own this website?"
Oh yeah, no.
that's what happens. So we'll make sure to put that at the bottom of the blog, and they'll get right to your website right away. But I'm going to close up the show. Like I said, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It was an amazing conversation. I think there's a lot of value in here for a lot of people who are starting and need that gumption to get going. But please subscribe and share to all of your friends. Where can you find the after show blog? At www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com. That's all one word. And please become a Pride member at your soonest convenience. All you have to do is go to that www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com and just give us your email. We do not sell it to any of our sponsors or any of those people. We only use your email to basically give you notices that new shows are coming out and things that are coming up in the future. If you would like to become a financial contributor, we do have a Patreon page. It's at www.patreon.com/lifeonlifesterms. Both L's are capitalized. Contribute as little as $5 a month, and we'll send you all the damn good vibes we can throughout the entirety of this show. Hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.